بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وآله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه، أرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي ربنا. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي. اللهم ربنا أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي. اللهم ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في غزة، اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدو منك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم فرجنا ولإخواننا في غزة في كل مكان. اللهم نفس كربنا وكربهم وثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والطف بنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وآله وصحبه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Okay. So we are continuing with our reading of Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam, and we have been looking at Allama Iqbal's critique of cosmological argument. So we had stopped here again. There again, the cause reached by the argument, that is the cosmological argument, cannot be regarded as a necessary being. For the obvious reason that the relation of cause and effect. So the world is the effect and this necessary being is the cause, and obviously cause and effect is a relation. The two terms of relation are equally necessary to each other, in the sense that, well, they are the obvious reason that in the relation of cause, they are necessary. So is this an objection against? So necessary being in the argument needs the effect as much as the effect needs the necessary being. But the relation is not symmetrical in itself. It's not even symmetrical from our perspective, but from the perspective of explanation, probably it is symmetrical. If we didn't have effect, we can't know the cause. So in that sense, it is both terms are necessary. Nor is the necessity of existence identical with the conceptual necessity. That's another point. So let's look at this point and then we'll move to the second point, inshallah. So the argument here is that so cause, we have cause, it is a necessary being. That's why it doesn't need any explanation. But this is a contingent being, which is the effect. And we are reading cause from effect because we only have effect, we don't have access to cause. And when you have effect, one thing is that it's possible when you're reading backward from effect to cause, then it is always possible to imagine that the cause we have reached is not the real cause, especially because we don't have any direct access to the cause. So we, like, if it rains, so rain is effect, and we're explaining it through clouds and the related conditions. So this is cause. But in this case, we have observed cause and effect together many times, and we have access to the cause. But in cosmological argument, the effect is the world, which is in need of explanation for various reasons, because it is an effect, because it is contingent being. And the cause we come up with is an speculative cause in the sense that we never have, or at least not at the level of argument, access to this being, necessary being we called cause. The religion called, and some philosophy call it God or necessary being. So it is always possible that even though argument might be convincing, but since this sort of argument can never be absolute, it's always going to be probable, even if the claim is that the argument is absolute. It's possible that there is some other cause, which is in fact the cause, as against the cause which we have imagined or which we have argued for. So there are always alternatives there, and one of the alternatives is that there is no cause as such. However improbable that alternative is always there, because that alternative is at least not logically contradictory. It might be logically, rationally unconvincing to some of us, or all of us. It can't be called a contradictory. Say, we're reading cause from effect, so we're going backward, and we never have a direct access to cause. It's always possible that there are alternative cause, or there's no cause at all, and calling an effect was just on ignorance, for example. So logically speaking, that's an important point. So now to go back to Allama Iqbal's specific point, that the cause reached by argument, not the cause in itself, but in the argument. This cause reached through effect. This cannot be regarded as necessary being, because in the chain of argument, effect is necessary for cause as much as cause is necessary for effect. In fact, effect is more necessary, because without effect, the whole argument would not have even, initiated. So what's the cogency of this argument? I think it looks a very very, on the face of it, convincing point, but I don't think it's a good point. Why? Because it's confusing two meanings of necessity. Although I would assume that even if it is not a good argument, it actually makes the point. Or even if it doesn't prove the point he's trying to make, he might prove adjacent and related points. But the point he's trying to make is that why it's not cogent. I think it's not cogent because when you call cause as a necessary being, you are calling it necessary being whether you have a right to it or not, as necessary being in itself, in the sense that it doesn't need, it's not dependent on any cause for its existence and its being, and everything else depends on it for its existence and being. But that's a totally different thing from saying that in the argument, effect is as necessary for cause as cause is necessary. That might be true, like in the argument. But from that, we can't deduce that in reality, in their being, effect and cause are necessary in the same way. Because in their being, one is claimed to be necessary in the sense that it doesn't depend on any other thing and doesn't need any explanation. On the other hand, effect not only depends on other being for its existence, its very existence, but also it does need explanation. So in that sense, the two claims are different. But I think we can still take Allama Iqbal's point that even that this is a necessary being and effect is a contingent being. It is ironic that in the argument, both are necessary in some way to each other. But at the end of, ultimately, their conceptions are totally different. Effect is contingent in conception. In that two senses, it needs explanation. At least that's the claim, and it depends on other things for it exists. The other end, cause is necessary in two senses. It doesn't need explanation. It doesn't depend on any other being for its existence. But what Iqbal is saying is different from this, is that in the argument both are necessary, because obviously if there was no effect, there wouldn't have been need for any explanation. So in that sense, effect is necessary for us to even think of cause. So that's a very minimalist thing. And cause is obviously necessary for effect because we are explaining through it. That's obvious. Yes. Now, the next thing he goes on to say is that nor is the necessary of existence identical with conceptual necessity. This is the real necessity which I was alluding to. So, the utmost that argument can prove. But probably this is too important point to do it with the first point, although it's related to the first point, but we'll do it in the next session, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب